This is the CBS Radio Network.
And this is KNX, AM and FM, Curious Radio, Los Angeles.
From Kraft comes a new kind of safflower oil margarine. Light, new, miracle safflower oil margarine. Made from 100% safflower oil and lightly whipped to give you 6 delicious cubes per pound. Although a pound still weighs a pound, every pat of new miracle safflower oil margarine is lighter. Actually 1/3 lighter than regular margarine. The texture is more delicate for smoother spreading. And this light new miracle, whipped from 100% safflower oil, gives you important nutritional benefits. And calories? Same per pound as regular margarines, but 12 less per pat with light new miracle safflower oil margarine from Kraft. Kraft also brings you a new salad and cooking oil. New miracle safflower oil for your frying, baking, and salad making.
Another crisp, clear, cool day throughout the Los Angeles area. The current temperature in Hollywood is 65 degrees and expected high of 68. In KNX Radio time, exactly 10:30.
Arthur Godfrey time resumes. Johnny Parker in the orchestra, Richard Hayes and Carol Sloan in New York, and my distinguished guests here in the lovely Kenilworth Hotel at Miami Beach are the columnist Morris McLemore of the Miami News and Gabriel Heater, whom I don't have to introduce to anyone. And it's so good, especially to see Gabe looking so well. I wish you could see how well he looks. He is tanned, and I'd like to know why Morris McLemore isn't tanned, living in the same town.
Well, I was out of town for 3 or 4 weeks.
That'll do it. That'll do it.
And then I had a little skin problem, so I didn't go out in the sun according to my doctor's orders.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, what a shame.
And that seems to be clearing up now, so I'll be out. Believe me, every day.
Great prospect for my curicura there.
There you are, a customer.
Gee, the sun certainly has done you good, Gabe. You look like a child.
Well, thank you very much, Arthur. I've been very lucky down here. Feeling better than I did up north. I used to sneeze my head off up north. And laryngitis would come 3-4 times a year regularly.
Yeah, it's terrible.
But you know, and one thing we've got down here that's a little different, we have Hank Meyer here. And if you don't have a beautiful day, you call him up and say, Hank, where the heck is that sun? And it comes out. Well, you know, it comes out.
Excuse me one second, Gabe, but being the kind of man this fella is, you know.
Gabe.
Yeah, and being an optimist by nature, or at least one filled with hope, and good health. I don't know how he managed to stay away from Florida as long as he did. How many years ago did you come down?
About 12 years ago.
Yeah, right. He should have been here 30 years ago.
Yes, I should have.
He was telling me earlier that what brought him down here was the night that they had a big blizzard in New York. And he and his wife were watching the TV, and a red-headed guy named Godfrey opened his television show by walking out of the surf.
That's right.
Oh, yes.
You remember that?
He went way, way
That was
out.
one of your first times here, wasn't it?
One of the first shows,
I
yeah.
came in swimming as calm as a porpoise. I mean, he was having a good time. There we were all huddled up with the oil burner going full blast. I said to my wife, why don't we go down to Florida? She said, what are you going to do in Florida? I said, I'm going to work. You mean just as you do here? I said, of course. And now I've got my whole family down here. And I think my wife would rather divorce me than go back north.
You know, I have had some dealings in this business with a relative of yours, a very fine young man who conducts a production business on the coast.
Oh, my nephew.
Your nephew.
Yes.
Very fine, handsome young fellow.
Yes, raconteur,
yeah. I got one product I got to tell you about quickly, which is glass wax for cleaning your windows. This is the same product that I had the honor and privilege of introducing to you 16 years ago on this show. It is now improved. They have a formula now which not only dissolves the dirt, even the greasiest dirt, but also absorbs it, so that when you wipe it off with a soft cloth, the window is sparkling clean and polished. You're silly if you do your windows in the old-fashioned way. This is so easy. Get glass wax, apply it properly, which is thinly and sparingly, with a damp sponge, and wipe it off with a dry cloth. And I'm going to call on the vocalists in New York, if I may now, gentlemen, for a moment. Got a lovely little gal up there named Carol Sloan, who has a tune called Hallelujah, I Love 'Em So.
Let me tell you about a boy I know. He is my baby and he lives next door. Every morning before the sun comes up, he brings my coffee in my favorite cup. That's why I know, yes I know, hallelujah, I love him so. When I'm in trouble and I have no friend, I know he'll go with me until the end. Everybody says, how do you know? I smile and say, well, he told me so. That's why I know, yes, baby, I know, hallelujah, I love him so. When I call him on the telephone, I say, baby, I'm all alone. By the time I count from 1 to 4, I hear him on my door. In the evening when the sun goes down, when there is nobody else around, he kisses me, he holds me tight, and he says, baby, everything is alright. That's why I know, yes I know, hallelujah, how I love him so. On the telephone, I say, baby, I'm so alone. By the time I count from 1 to 4, there he is at my door. In the evening when the sun goes down, when there is nobody else around, he kisses me, he holds me tight, and he says, baby, everything is so cool. That's why I know, yes I know, hallelujah, I love him so. Hallelujah, how I love him so. Hallelujah, how I love him so.
Yeah. Carol Sloan. You know she gets prettier all the time, too. Oh, when you know that this girl is going to appear in a nightclub anywhere near you, don't you fail to go catch her. She is a delightful evening's entertainment anytime you can get to her. Boy, is she good. She stands there and sings for about 45 minutes, and you are never more delighted. That's Carol Sloan. Well, now, look, isn't it a coincidence? General Development has a little something for me to talk about this morning. And they don't want me to talk about Port Charlotte today, which I usually do, but they want to talk about Port St. Lucie Country Club. You've seen that?
Yes, sir. I was there for the opening.
Isn't that beautiful?
And, brother, did they have the folks?
Yeah.
They came from behind every palm in Florida. I never saw so many people in my life.
You seen it, Gabe?
No, I haven't. It's a real nice lake.
Well, it's up there at the confluence of the Lucie and the Indian Rivers, isn't it?
Well, I'm sure that's...
Isn't that about it?
Correct, yeah.
Right there at the...
It's right on a point.
On a point where it goes into the ocean.
Right.
So for a yachtsman, fisherman, it's a paradise. If the weather is nasty out in the ocean, he's got this terrific bay and 2 rivers to fish in, and of course the farther up the river he goes, the more different kinds of fish, until I'm quite sure you can get into bass country. But the thing is that the The place has, it's about 50 miles north of Palm Beach.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know if you can even buy anything up there anymore. I guess you can, of course. You can always buy something. But you want a vacation. I recommend this Port St. Lucie Country Club. You can play on 2 beautiful 18-hole golf courses, enjoy the facilities of one of the most beautiful dining facilities I've ever seen, a clubhouse, just gorgeous, swimming pool, kids' playgrounds, and a marina, which is really a marina. In fact, you sit in the dining room, and you look out the picture windows on one side, and you're overlooking this gorgeous golf course, and on the other side is the swimming pool and the marina. It's catered to 2 kinds at once. And if you like, you can live in your own furnished home, 1, 2, or 3 bedrooms, complete hotel service, linen, silverware, TV, cooking facilities, if you want to cook instead of using the dining facilities of the country club. And you know what? You can play golf every day. There are very few days in the year in Florida, southern Florida, when you can't play golf. And those days would be the very few in the rainy season when it really rains hard, right?
Right.
Most of the time you can play.
Usually you'll find a few nuts doing it on those days, too.
Really?
Yeah. Some beleaguered Yankee who finally got down and desperate to play a little bit.
That's the time when I really feel sorry for somebody. He's saved his money and his opportunity and comes down and hits one of those dang rainy weekends, which we get once in a while, of course. Otherwise, the place would burn up.
Right.
But I just hope that's the best thing I could wish for you. That the weekend you come to Florida, it doesn't happen. Boy, I've had it happen to me, Gabe. You remember some of those shows we did down here in bathing suits, shivering?
Yes. Woo! Still, you had a great time.
Oh, yes.
You did a tremendous job for a lot of people because, except for you, a lot of these people would say, oh, yeah, someday I'm going to go to Florida. It was a plan, a hope. And they'd get older and older, and then, unfortunately, it was too late. He was gone, or his wife was gone, or something happened. The idea of being able to get people to do something now when they can use it is, to me, one of the great things, great accomplishments, if you can do it. You've done it.
Well, we've had a great many promoters of note, some famous and some infamous, I guess, working around Florida. But I think that Arthur has, I know he's gotten more distance out of his remarks than in the rest of them.
Oh, yes.
And probably
Here is a news alert bulletin from the KNX Radio News Bureau. President Kennedy was shot today, just as his motorcade left downtown Dallas. Mrs. Kennedy jumped up and grabbed Mr. Kennedy. She cried, "Oh, no." The motorcade kept going. Mrs. Kennedy was in the car with the president. Repeating, President Kennedy was shot today, just as his motorcade left downtown Dallas, Texas. Further details as they are available in the KNX News Bureau.
Yeah, he's got the hotel now. The other day, the Minute Maid people gave me a beautiful watch, and thank heaven they autographed it to me and inscribed the back case, or he'd have that. But he has this hotel now.
We interrupt this program for a CBS Radio Net Alert Bulletin.
This is Alan Jackson reporting from CBS News headquarters in New York with a bulletin on an incident which just occurred in Dallas, Texas, where President Kennedy is visiting. Shot downtown Dallas. Mrs. Kennedy, who was riding with him, jumped up and grabbed Mr. Kennedy and cried, "Oh, no." The motorcade sped on. Riding in the same car with the president for this particular motorcade was Governor and Mrs. John B. Connolly, the governor of the state of Texas. According to the last report, both the president and the governor were hit by the bullets. And now one more ad has come in. The president, his limp body cradled in the arm of his wife, was rushed to Parkland Hospital. The governor was also taken to Parkland. Clint Hill, a Secret Service agent assigned to Mrs. Kennedy, escorted the president into the hospital, and we are awaiting further word on his condition.
We will repeat these details as they have come into us here in our New York news headquarters. A would-be assassin fired at the presidential automobile in Dallas a short while ago, hitting both President Kennedy and Texas Governor John Connally. President Kennedy was cradled in his wife's arms as the car sped off to Parkland Hospital in Dallas. Both the President and Governor Connally have been taken into the hospital for emergency treatment. An Associated Press photographer, James Altkin, said he saw blood on the President's head. He said he heard 2 shots but thought someone was shooting fireworks until he saw the blood on the President. The photographer, Altkin, said that he saw no one with a gun at the time. These are the details we have so far on this situation. We are awaiting further information that might come in by telephone or via the Press Association wire to our news headquarters here in New York. The President, as you know, was on a 3-day tour of the state of Texas. He flew down yesterday and was preparing to make an appearance and a speech today in Dallas before flying on to the state capital of Austin for an appearance this evening. We will repeat the information we have of now. Both President Kennedy and Texas Governor John Connally have been wounded by an assassin's bullet. We do not know the condition of either man. Both have been taken to Parkland Hospital in Dallas, Texas. This is the latest we have at our CBS News headquarters in New York. We now resume our regularly scheduled program.
I've ever seen that book of hers, on photography, on the photographing the human figure, beautiful. And her sculpture is all around the house, her little art, her taste everywhere. They have one of the most beautiful homes I've ever seen.
You walk in there, you relax completely.
In the early days down here in Miami, they had a fellow by the name of Steve Hannigan, who was the publicity man.
One of the dearest friends I ever had.
Right, a terrific public relations man, a publicist, or whatever you want to call him. He was a huckster. He could sell. He could do anything else. This is kind of a tough act to top, or to compete with. Yeah. I think Hank has done pretty well.
Very well.
He's done well.
Yeah, Steve, was a partner with Sherman Billingsley, Morton Downey, and I in the Sortilege, the Sortilege perfume thing, We took that on about 15 years ago. And we still have it. We never took in any other partner when Steve left us, when he died. Just the 3 of us still have it. We don't make any money with it, and we'll be very happy to sell to the first guy that comes along with a few bucks. But it's a very fine perfume, and we use it mostly. It's one of those high-quality, very expensive things that I had no business getting into, but...
Where is that made? Is it made here
France.
In France?
Oh, yeah, it's imported, yeah. Le Galion, L-E-G-A-L-I-O-N. They make several scents, of which Sortilege, S-O-R-T-I-L-E-G-E, is the most desirable, shall we say. Shall we say, Madame, that it produces the greatest results?
That confused a lot of fellas.
Yeah, it confuses the entire populace. It has probably sold more mink than any other smell in the world. Yeah.
That is an accomplishment.
Oh, gee.
You ought to try to get some of the mink action here on Miami Beach, They have a lot of mink around here.
You have some wonderful customs down here. One is that everybody in the evening is dressed, which I love. You don't see too many people wandering around in aloha shirts with their shirt tail out around here at night. People dress nicely for dinner. And the second is this wonderful custom we have of bringing their lovely daughters to Miami. I love to see fathers.
Here's further detail on the News Alert Bulletin broadcast just a few moments ago on KNX Radio. This is Dick Wall reporting. President Kennedy has been gunned down by an assassin's bullets. The chief executive apparently was struck by 2 bullets. Texas Governor John Connally also was hit by at least 1 bullet. Both the president and the governor are confined now to Parkland Hospital in Dallas. The condition of the governor and the president is not determined to this moment. 2 shots at least were heard. One Secret Service man said he heard 3 shots fired. The president fell limp into Mrs. Kennedy's arms. The president's wife cried out, "Oh no," when the shots occurred. The president was in Dallas on a 3-day speech-making trip. Both he and the governor were taken to the same hospital. The president had spoken this morning in Fort Worth and then flew to Dallas following that speech. He was to deliver a speech during a motorcade through the city. Newsmen some 5 car lengths behind the president's car heard what sounded like 3 bursts of gunfire. Secret Service agents in the car following the president quickly pulled out automatic rifles. The bubble of the president's car was down when the shots rang out. Mr. Kennedy slumped over in the back seat, face down. Connally lay on the floor of the rear seat. Wounds in the governor's chest were clearly visible. Associated Press reporter Jack Bell asked Kenneth O'Connell, presidential assistant, if Kennedy was dead. He got no answer. Kennedy was reported taken to Parkland Hospital near the Dallas trademark where he was to have made a speech. AP reporter Bell said Kennedy was transferred to an ambulance. He lay on a seat of the car and blood stained his clothing. Bell reported 3 shots were fired as the motorcade entered the triple underpass, which leads to the Stemmons Freeway route to Parkland Hospital. Pandemonium immediately broke loose around the scene. The Secret Service waved the motorcade on at top speed to the hospital. Even at high speed, it took nearly 5 minutes to get the car to the ambulance entrance of the hospital. Reporters saw the president lying flat on his face on the seat of his car. AP reporter Bell said a man and a woman were scrambling on the upper level of a walkway overlooking the underpass. Lawrence O'Brien, the presidential aide, said he had no information on whether the president still was alive. Mrs. Kennedy was weeping and trying to hold up her husband's head when reporters reached the car. President Kennedy and Texas Governor John Connally now are at Parkland Hospital in Dallas. There has been no report so far on their condition. Both men were wounded by an assassin's bullets as the president's car, in which Connally and Mrs. Kennedy were also riding, passed under a triple underpass on the way for Mr. Kennedy to make a speech in Dallas. He had spoken earlier this morning in Fort Worth, Texas, then flew on to Dallas, where he was scheduled to deliver a hard-hitting speech. Here's more detail. The wounds indicated an automatic weapon was used in the shooting. 3 loud bursts of gunfire were heard before the president and governor fell. In the turmoil, it was impossible to determine whether Secret Service agents and Dallas police returned the fire. It couldn't be immediately determined either whether Mrs. Kennedy or Mrs. Connally were wounded. Both men were in the car with the president and the governor and were crushed down over the inert forms of their husbands as the big car raced toward the hospital. Mrs. Kennedy could be seen on the floor of the rear seat with her head toward the president. Associated Press reporter Jack Bell asked Kenneth O'Donnell, the presidential assistant, if the president were dead. O'Donnell gave him no answer. Bell said Kennedy was transferred to an ambulance on the way to the hospital and lay on the seat of the car. Blood stained his...
We interrupt this program for a CBS Radio Net Alert Bulletin.
This is Alan Jackson reporting from CBS News headquarters in New York with more details on the incident which just occurred in Dallas a short while ago, where President Kennedy has been wounded by a would-be assassin. He and Texas Governor Connally were shot from ambush as their motorcade drove through Dallas shortly after the president arrived in the city on the second day of his tour. So far, there is no indication of how seriously either man was injured. Both were lying flat in their car as the automobile sped off to a hospital. Both men have been taken to the Park Lane Hospital in Dallas for treatment. The incident occurred just east of the triple underpass facing a park in downtown Dallas. Reporters in the motorcade with the presidential party were about 5 car lengths behind the chief executive's car at the time. It has been difficult to tell immediately whether the First Lady and Mrs. Connally, who were riding in the same car, might have been injured. They were holding their husbands as the car rushed off to the hospital. and we are still waiting more details on just what went on there. Secret Service agents in a follow-up car quickly unlimbered their automatic rifles. They drew their pistols, but the damage had been done. One of our correspondents on the scene is now in contact with us, so let's switch now to news correspondent Dan Rather in Dallas.
Dallas police have just confirmed that Texas Governor John Connally also was shot at the same time as President Kennedy, as the two men rode in the same car in a motorcade from downtown Dallas toward the Dallas Trade Mart, where President Kennedy was to have made a speech. Pandemonium broke out at the scene of the shooting as three shots emerged from somewhere in the crowd. The crowd along the route of the motorcade was 4 and 5 lines deep. At the time of the shooting, the motorcade was passing at least 3 buildings, more than 3 stories. One child, aged 7, told authorities that he saw a man lean out of the 5th floor of one of the buildings and fire the shots. Police and Secret Service agents now have that building surrounded and are going through the building in a systematic search. Still, another witness at the scene said, this man was an adult, said he thought he saw a man and a woman crawling along a walkway over the motorcade route, and that this adult said it was possible that that man and woman could have fired the shots. Dallas police say they have no information on the condition of either President Kennedy or Texas Governor John Connally. Several reporters who were in the motorcade said that Mr. Kennedy had blood on his head as he was taken into an ambulance and rushed to Dallas's Parkland Hospital, just a few blocks from the Trade Mart where he was to have made this speech. This is Dan Rather in Dallas, Texas.
That's the latest from one of our team of correspondents with the presidential party in Dallas. We will be getting additional details from minute to minute as we continue here. The shooting took place at 1:45 Eastern Time. That was just about a little over 10 minutes ago. President Kennedy apparently was shot in the head. He fell face down in the back seat of his car, and there was blood on his head. Mrs. Kennedy, riding in the car with him, shouted, "Oh no," and tried to hold up her husband's head. Riding in the same car were Governor Connally and Mrs. Connally. Governor Connally also was hit. We have no information on how seriously either man has been hurt. Connally remained half-seated, but slumped to the left when he was shot. There was blood on his face and forehead. Both the president and the governor were rushed to Parkland Hospital near the Dallas Trade Mart, where President Kennedy was to have made a speech today. As you know, this was the middle day of his 3-day tour of Texas. He spoke in Texas last night. He arrived in Dallas only a short while ago, was to make a speech at the Trade Mart there in a short while, and then go on to the state capital of Austin for a reception and a fundraising dinner this evening. The shooting took place within minutes after the presidential party arrived in Dallas. There are no details on just how it occurred. Secret Service men and Dallas police, as we have heard from Correspondent Rather, have one building surrounded where they think the would-be assassins may have been located. Some of the Secret Service agents thought the gunfire they heard was from an automatic weapon fired to the right rear of the chief executive's car, probably from the grassy knoll to which motorcycle policemen directed their attention as they raced up the slope. And a late word, Texas Congressman Albert Thomas says he has been informed that both President Kennedy and Governor Connally are still alive after having been shot in an assassination attempt. That is the first word we have had to that effect. Congressman Thomas says he has been informed that President Kennedy and Governor Connally are both still alive after the shooting attempt a short while ago. Thomas, standing outside the corridor of the emergency room in which both the President and Connally are under treatment, said he has been told the President is still alive but is in a very critical condition. President Kennedy is in a very critical condition after the attempted assassination in Dallas, Texas, less than a quarter of an hour ago. The security police have the one building surrounded where, according to one report, the assassins may have been planning their ambush. There is one other report that a man and a woman were seen on a grassy knoll overlooking the motorcade route, and that perhaps that was the ambush spot. Details are still scarce. The situation was a turmoil, as would be understandable. Immediately after the shooting took place, when the president was taken into the emergency room, a call was sent out immediately for some of the top surgical specialists in Dallas. As we mentioned a moment ago, the president was shot in the head. He fell back in his car, and blood could be seen on his head. And a call was also sent out for a Roman Catholic priest. This is a standard procedure in serious operations of this type, and is not to be taken as indicating the expected fate of the president yet. Our last report was that he and the governor are both still alive in the hospital emergency room after the shooting. The call has gone out for surgical specialists to treat the governor and the president. Congressman Jim Wright of Fort Worth says that both men were seriously wounded in the shooting, but that they are alive. Vice President Lyndon Johnson was in a car behind the president. There is no immediate indication that he was hurt. In fact, there's no indication at all of what might have happened to Johnson, since only the president's car and its Secret Service follow-up car went to the hospital in the initial drive. So there we have the situation as it exists at the present time. Assassins attempted to shoot and kill the President of the United States and the Governor of Texas a short while ago as the presidential motorcade drove through downtown Dallas shortly after the presidential party arrived in that city. The president and his wife and the governor and his wife were both riding in the same car, the lead limousine of their motorcade, going to the Dallas Trade Mart where the president was to have made a speech beginning in just a few minutes from now. So this situation has dramatically brought the news that the president is in critical condition, seriously wounded, and so is the governor. But both men are alive and being given treatment in the emergency ward of the Parkland Hospital in Dallas. And we are awaiting further details and further information on the condition of the men and on the possible apprehension of the would-be assassins. We have had 2 reports that Secret Service men are surrounding a building where it is believed the would-be assassins are holed up on the 5th floor. There was another report that a man and a woman were spotted on a grassy knoll overlooking the parade route, and that motorcycle policemen who were escorting the motorcade at that time quickly got off of their bikes and scurried up this route and went after 2 persons who apparently were hiding in the bushes. We have a further report from another one of our correspondents in the area. Let's go now to news correspondent Nelson Benton at the hospital.
A few moments ago, there was still no official word on the president's condition from authorities at Dallas Parkland Memorial Hospital. However, Senator Ralph Yarborough of Texas, who was riding 3 cars behind the president in the Dallas motorcade, gave reporters a description of what he saw as the president was shot and as his car followed the presidential limousine from downtown Dallas to the hospital. Senator Yarborough told newsmen that he heard 3 shots. He did not see where they came from, but he thought he heard 3. He said he then saw a Secret Service man beating his fist on the president's limousine. Senator Yarborough told newsmen it was too horrible to describe, but he did tell reporters that both Governor Connally and the president were gravely injured. He said that the president appeared to have been shot in the head. Senator Yarborough, as we say, was 3 cars back from the president's car. He said his limousine followed to the hospital. He only saw the attendants at the hospital carrying the president into the hospital. Thus far, no report, as we know from here, on his exact condition. This is Nelson Benton outside Parkland Memorial Hospital in Dallas, Texas.
One further report has come into our news headquarters here in New York by the Associated Press, quoting the Secret Service as saying that the president remains in the emergency room and that the governor has been moved to the general operating room of Parkland Hospital. One Secret Service man was overheard telling another that there was no need to move the president because emergency facilities are entirely adequate in the emergency room where he is located. We have a report now from one more of our correspondents on the scene. Our White House correspondent who was accompanying the president here is CBS News correspondent Robert Pierpoint in Dallas.
President Kennedy's condition here at Parkland Memorial Hospital is apparently quite serious. 2 priests reportedly have just gone in to be with the president, and according to Senator Ralph Yarborough, who was in the motorcade, the president's condition is serious. As far as we know, here is what happened. At 12:30 today, as the presidential motorcade was making its way through the crowded streets of Dallas, 2 or 3 shots rang out. The president's car immediately sped away, and we learned later the president and Governor Connally of Texas had been wounded. We think the president was hit in the head. We are not sure. I repeat, 2 priests have gone in to be with the president. The situation looks extremely serious. This is Robert Pierpoint at Parkland Memorial Hospital.
Our news bureau in Washington has reported that the Senate has recessed and that Senator Ted Kennedy, the youngest of the Kennedy brothers, was presiding over the Senate when the news was received. Kennedy, according to a member of his staff, was still alive as of 12:55 p.m. Central Standard Time, that is, as of 10 minutes ago. Mrs. Kennedy apparently was safe, and Mrs. Connally also is safe. Both women were riding in the same car, the same limousine, in which the president and the governor were riding in their motorcade through Dallas when the assassination attempt took place. The governor, as we heard a moment ago, has been taken into the operating room. The president remains in the emergency ward of the hospital, and one Secret Service man was overheard telling another that there was no need to move the president because emergency facilities are entirely adequate in the emergency room. But as we have heard from correspondent Pierpoint, the president's condition apparently is serious. A call has gone out for specialists, and 2 Catholic priests have been summoned to be with the president in this moment. The president's mother and father have been advised that their son was shot in Dallas. They are presently in Hyannisport, Massachusetts, and are being kept informed as the details are available. This, one further note. This just repeats a note we had a moment ago that Mrs. Kennedy and Mrs. Connally are both safe. Neither of the women was injured in the assassination attempt that apparently seriously hurt both of their husbands. And while we are waiting for further details to come in from Dallas, here is my colleague, Dallas Townsend, with a summary on similar situations in the past. Dallas Townsend.
Well, Alan, the most famous assassination in American history, of course, was the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, the 16th president of the United States, who was shot by John Wilkes Booth in April 1865 and died the following day. After that, there was an attempt on William McKinley, who was president in 1901. William McKinley was shot on September 6, 1901, and he died September 14th after lingering for several days in extreme pain. An anarchist named Leon Czolgosz was executed for the crime on October 29th. In 1933, President-elect Franklin Delano Roosevelt was shot at in Miami, Florida, by an anarchist named Joseph Zangara. The anarchist missed the president-elect, but fatally wounded Mayor Anton Cermak of Chicago. Mayor Cermak died March 6th. Zangara was electrocuted on March 20th, 1933, just about the time that Roosevelt was inaugurated president. When President Truman was in the White House, actually he was in Blair House at the time, there was an attempt on his life by Puerto Rican super-nationalists who attacked Blair House in the early afternoon, fired at the Secret Service, and actually shot and killed one of the Secret Service guards. The president was on the 3rd floor of Blair House at the time. As I recall, he came to the window. One of the Secret Service guards looked up, saw him, and said, "Get back, Mr. President," and he got back. The president was not injured in that incident. Since that time, there have been no known attacks on the president until the one today in Dallas, Texas, against President Kennedy and Governor John Connally. And as Alan Jackson has been telling you, they are critically injured, but are still alive at the moment, both of them in hospital. Alan?
Outside the emergency room, in a buff-walled hallway, anxious members of the White House staff have gathered, including Major General Chester Clifton, the military aide to the president, and Brigadier General Godfrey McHugh, the presidential Air Force aide. We have more information now from our correspondents on the scene. Let's switch to Dan Rather.
Dallas police and federal agents have completely surrounded a multi-story building which was on the motorcade route directly across the street from the scene where President John Kennedy and Texas Governor John Connally were shot a short while ago. Police say they have found 4 empty cartridges on the 5th floor of the building. Police with sawed-off shotguns and other weapons have completely ringed the entire area. One ring of police is around the building itself. Another is around about a 3-block area in which the building is located. Police and federal agents are going through a systematic search of the building. Police emphasize that they have no definite information as yet as to whether the empty cartridges found in the building were those fired from the gun which hit President Kennedy and Governor Connally. But police are working on the theory that the would-be assassin fired his shots from that 5-story building which was on the motorcade route directly across the street from where President Kennedy and Governor Connally were shot. Latest word from Dallas's Parkland Hospital is that the condition of President Kennedy is being withheld at the moment. There are conflicting reports as to whether the injuries are serious or not serious. 2 Roman Catholic priests have been admitted to the president's room. No word yet on the condition of Texas Governor John Connally. This is Dan Rather in Dallas, Texas.
To briefly summarize the situation for those of you who may have just joined us in the last few minutes, President Kennedy was shot and wounded a short time ago in Dallas, Texas, and so was Texas Governor John Connally as their motorcade drove through downtown Dallas shortly after the presidential party arrived in that city, where the president was to have made a speech beginning just about now at the Dallas Trade Mart. The latest report in is that President Kennedy was given blood transfusions a short while ago as a result of the injuries he received in the assassination attempt. The President and Mrs. Kennedy were riding in the lead limousine, as were Governor and Mrs. Connally. The 2 women were not hurt in the shooting. Both the President and the Governor were shot. Both apparently were hit in the head. The initial reports say that the President fell back on his face and lay on the seat in the car, while his wife held his head in her arms. Governor Connally reportedly slumped, but remained in a half-sitting position as the car sped off to the hospital for treatment. President Kennedy and Governor Connally injured in an assassination attempt in Dallas about a half an hour ago. And President Kennedy has been given blood transfusions. Governor Connally, we were told a few moments ago, was taken from the emergency ward into the operating room. Surgical specialists have been called in, and 2 Catholic priests have been called in to be with President Kennedy at the present time. We are told that the president's condition is serious. We are not told of any details about his condition. The turnout, the crowd along the streets, which had turned out to greet the presidential party, had been estimated about 250,000 people, about the largest of the current Texas tour that the president has encountered so far. He flew down to Texas yesterday, as you know, and was to spend 3 days touring and speaking at principal points around the state. The shooting occurred a short time after the presidential party arrived in Dallas. And as we have heard from correspondent Rather, apparently it took place from the 5th floor of a downtown office building, where police and security agents have now found 4 spent cartridges, presumably those that were used in the assassination attempt. The building has been surrounded. We do not have any word on whether any people have been apprehended and linked directly with the shooting yet. The heavy street crowds between the Love Field Airport and the scene of the shooting, the crowds that had turned out to greet President Kennedy on his trip into Dallas, were overwhelmingly friendly. The shooting occurred about a half an hour ago and immediately created turmoil and confusion in the crowd and certainly in the presidential motorcade. The presidential reporting party, the party of reporters and correspondents, were driving in cars about 5 car lengths behind the president. As soon as the shooting took place and the president and the governor were injured, Secret Service men and Dallas motorcycle police immediately waved that car on by itself to the hospital. And in the resulting confusion and the crowd, the motorcade itself was strung out for some distance, and it took anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes before all of the White House party finally arrived at the hospital. Let's hear now more from the scene as we switch again to Dallas and CBS News correspondent Robert Pierpoint.
Human blood type B+ has just been rushed into the operating room where President Kennedy and Governor Connally are being worked over by doctors here at Parkland Memorial Hospital. We do not know whom the blood is for, but the situation still looks very bad. As we said a little earlier, 2 priests have also gone in to be with the president. Here is an eyewitness report of approximately what happened at just about 12:30 noon as the motorcade with the president's car in front was going under a railroad overpass to enter a parkway. 3 shots rang out very loudly. Immediately, the president's car sped up. The SS, the Secret Service men, pulled out machine guns, and officers in the area began to fan out. The president's car sped directly to Parkland Memorial Hospital here. It speeds up to 60 miles per hour. As the car pulled up, President Kennedy was bent over, motionless, with blood on his chest. Mrs. Kennedy was hovering over him, but he was lifted out of the car, and reporters noted that he was wheeled into the hospital. That is the last that any reporters have seen of him as he disappeared on a stretcher, motionless, into the hospital. I repeat that the latest information we have only is that human blood has been rushed into the operating rooms. We do not know whether it is for the president or for Governor Connally, both of whom are reported to be in serious condition. This is Robert Pierpoint at Parkland Memorial Hospital in Dallas.
Here in New York, the New York stock exchanges have closed early for the day because of the shooting of President Kennedy. In Washington, the Senate recessed pending developments as word reached the Capitol there that the president had been shot in Dallas. The House was not in session at the time. Senator Mansfield, the Democratic leader, made the motion to recess at 4 minutes before 2 Eastern Time. Senator Wayne Morris of Oregon said just before the recess, if there ever was an hour when all Americans should pray, this is the hour. Let's go back to Dallas. Here's another report by correspondent Dan Rather.
The Dallas County Sheriff's Office reports it has arrested a 25-year-old suspect, a man suspected of possibly being connected with the shooting of President John Kennedy and Texas Governor John Connally. Also from the scene of the area where the president and Texas governor were shot shortly after noon Central Standard Time today, the police continue their search around a 5-story building in which 4 empty cartridges were found on the 5th floor. Another report from the scene of the shooting seems to confirm that 1 Secret Service agent was killed at the same time President Kennedy and Governor Connally were shot. This is Dan Rather in Dallas, Texas.
We are gathering details on a tragic story that has occurred in today's American history, where the President of the United States and the Governor of the state of Texas have been shot and seriously wounded, apparently, in an assassination attempt in downtown Dallas. There is an unconfirmed report that Vice President Lyndon Johnson had been wounded slightly. One spectator said he saw Johnson walk into the hospital holding his arm, and a short while ago, Mrs. Johnson was escorted by Secret Service agents into the emergency room where the president is. Police say they do not know whether the vice president was in that room at the time. But now we have this latest report, an unconfirmed one, that the Vice President Johnson was wounded slightly. Let's switch now for news from the nation's capital as we switch to news correspondent Wells Church on Capitol Hill.
Well, of course,
Washington was probably hardest hit by this startling news. And oddly enough, by coincidence, the president's brother, Senator Ted Kennedy, was the presiding officer of the Senate when they learned of the shooting. Actually, he was calmly signing his name to a series of group photographs for visitors when an aide came running in with the word from Dallas. Well, most of the senators looked up, of course, obviously angry at the interruption, and the aide ran to Kennedy's chair. The senator threw down his pen, and the pictures scattered all over as he ran for the door. And the same aide ran from senator to senator telling them the news. They'd just been discussing the proposed extension of aid to rural libraries. Minority Leader Dirksen put his hand to his heart. Senator Wayne Morse of Oregon, who had been leading the discussion, well, he walked a few steps and he stopped and he turned and then he ran straight for a side door. Others in the chamber at the time included Senator Mansfield, and Senator Symington of Missouri, and Senator Randolph of West Virginia, all gathered at Dirksen's desk for a moment, and then they all fled the chamber. Reporters crashed over each other in a dash for the doors. The usual scattering of tourists, no more than 100 were left, everyone completely stunned. At the moment, the Senate when I came in, the Senate was in recess on the call of the chair, but Roger Mudd, CBS News correspondent on Capitol Hill, has some later news than that. Roger?
The Senate has just gone back into session at the call of Majority Leader Mansfield, and when I left the floor just a moment ago with the ringing of the bell summoning the senators back, Senator Dirksen said the intention was for the chaplain of the Senate, Frederick Brown Harris, to lead the Senate in a prayer, and then the Senate would go out adjourning to await again the call of the chair. After Senator Teddy Kennedy quickly left the presiding officer's chair, his place was taken by Senator Spessard Holland of Florida. The Senate at that moment was in the midst of a quorum call. The quorum call was suspended. Senator Mansfield got unanimous consent on two pending pieces of legislation, and then the House went into recess. Very quickly, senators came flocking in from the cloakrooms, from their offices, from the restaurant down below, and in the back of the Senate chamber, along the corridor that backs the chamber, are two wire service machines, and that very quickly became the center of activity. As I went through, I noticed that one, Senators Inoue of Hawaii, Symington of Missouri, and Gore of Tennessee. Over at the other wire machine was Harry Byrd, Bob Bartlett from Alaska, Stephen Young of Ohio, Herman Talmadge of Georgia, Dick Russell of Georgia, Ken Keating of New York, and Dick Russell was reading aloud to the assembled senators the news that kept coming in paragraph by paragraph from Dallas. The Senate official who brought the first word in to Teddy Kennedy was Richard Riddell, who serves as a press liaison official for the Senate and summons senators or reporters as they come in. Most of the members of the Senate, Wells, were almost too shocked to open their mouths. What I heard Albert Gore say was, it's just horrible. That's all I can say. I went and talked to Jim Pearson, young Republican from Kansas. He told me, I feel sick at my stomach.
Many of the senators came rushing here to the Senate radio gallery, expecting to find later news here than they might even on that wire. Senator Curtis, for example, rushed in. Actually, his face was flushed. He was chomping on a cigar, and of course, we weren't able to tell them any more than you, the audience, have already heard. CBS newsman David Schumacher was in the gallery at the time that Senator Kennedy was told of the difficulty in Dallas. Were there any other impressions you got? Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, we had to send him away. We're trying to have Dave. Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States is dead. John F. Kennedy has died of the wounds received in an assassination in Dallas less than an hour ago. We repeat, it has just been announced that President Kennedy is dead. John Fitzgerald Kennedy, the 35th President of the United States, is dead at the age of 46, shot by an assassin as he drove through the streets of Dallas, Texas, less than an hour ago.